That emblem, she whispered, staring at the human sentinel's chest. You're him. The coppery barrens of Orpheus Delta sprawled beneath a bruised violet sky, the wind carrying the scent of scorched metal and old sorrow. Lyra, her bioluminescent green markings glowing faintly along her toned arms, feline ears twitching atop her head, gazed out from the cockpit of her nimble Zephyra scout craft. The hull still shimmered with the heat of atmospheric entry, and the vessel's panels pulsed to the rhythm of her steady breathing. She was here for truth. The collapse of the Helion colony was more than just an attack by the Kyrax horde, she was sure of it. The official records were too clean, too simple. Lyra's intercepted transmissions spoke of something hidden, a shadow in the data called Sentinel Aegis. The starport's makeshift lounge was nothing more than a gutted shuttle shell, its hull warped by old impacts, the interior strung with sagging lights. Boasts of fortune seekers echoed in the metallic space, voices thick with bravado and drink. Lyra slipped through the crowd, her lithe frame weaving past a pair of dust-caked salvagers, arguing over the price of grav rations. Her slit-pupilled eyes, reflective as polished emeralds, swept across the throng, searching, calculating. Near the rear, a port overseer slumped beside a flickering holomap, the projections stuttering over topography rendered obsolete by the last orbital strike. The overseer's face was a roadmap of exhaustion, her uniform stained and patched. Looking for trouble or answers, the woman muttered, not bothering to lift her gaze. Maybe both, Lyra replied, voice soft but edged with resolve. A slow smirk crept onto the overseer's face. She jerked her chin toward a shadowed alcove. If you're set on the ruins, talk to him. Lyra followed the gesture. In the gloom, alone at a battered table, sat Marcus, a broad-shouldered human, his dark hair streaked with silver, stubble shadowing a jaw set by years of grit. He watched her approach, gray eyes flat and unreadable, reflecting a lifetime of hardship and wary calculation. She slid onto the bench across from him, the table's surface sticky with spilt synthale. She placed a stack of credits between them, letting them catch the sickly light. I need a guide to the Helion ruins. I pay well, and I don't ask questions you don't want to answer. Marcus barely glanced at the credits. You're not the first off-worlder to try your luck in those ruins. The Kyrax left more than craters. His voice was low, graveled with old wounds. I'm not here for salvage, she said, lowering her voice. I'm after something called Sentinel Aegis. You know the name? He went still, the lines around his eyes deepening. I know what you're risking. With a slow motion, he slid the credits back toward her. Not enough. Lyra's tail twitched with frustration. She reached into her satchel and drew out a small glassy cylinder, its core glowing with caged blue fire. Ion battery, Mark 7, still charged. She set it beside the credits. Marcus's expression finally shifted. Curiosity, maybe need. Where'd you get that? Traded for it on Lysara's moon. Yours, if you take me past the outer barricades. I have a deep scan module that needs power. He studied her, weighing the risks, the reward, and something else. At last, he nodded. We leave at first light. Bring only what you can carry. Dawn on Orpheus Delta was an exhalation of violet light through broken clouds. Marcus's battered quad-tracked crawler idled outside the port, hull patched with mismatched plates, the engine grumbling like an old beast roused too soon. Lyra slung her satchel over her shoulder and climbed into the passenger seat, the crawler's interior smelling of ozone and old leather. They set out in silence, the machine groaning over shattered avenues, dust pluming in their wake. The ruins of Helion rose on the horizon, spires fractured, their shadows long across the dead city. Lyra's attention was divided between her instruments, the scanner's flickering glyphs, the radio's muted crackle, and Marcus, silent and focused, hands steady at the controls. He navigated the labyrinth of rubble with the ease of memory, only breaking the silence to warn, "Hold on." A fractured bridge loomed ahead, Its span collapsed except for a sliver of roadway. Marcus gunned the engine, the crawler's treads screaming against broken concrete. The whole vehicle jolted as they hit the gap, suspension shrieking, Lyra gripping the seat with white-knuckled urgency. They landed with a bone-rattling crash on the other side. Lyra's heart hammered, breath caught between exhilaration and fear. "You do that often?" she managed, trying to sound unimpressed. Marcus's lips quirked in a rare half-smile. "Only when I can't turn back." They pressed onward, deeper into the ruins. The city's skeleton loomed overhead, haunted by the wind's mournful song. At one shattered promenade, Lyra scrambled from the crawler, eager to scan a glyph-covered slab jutting from the rubble. The ground crumbled under her boots, sending her sliding toward a gaping fissure. Marcus was there in an instant. His hands gripped her arms, strong and sure, pulling her back from the edge. For a moment, they were pressed close, his heartbeat a steady thrum against her chest, his touch lingering just a moment too long before he released her. "Careful," he said, voice rough. "The ground won't always give warnings." Lyra looked up at him, her resolve melting into something more complicated. A spark of curiosity, a question she hadn't thought to ask. She brushed the dust from her arms, her bioluminescence pulsing with adrenaline. They moved on, but the boundaries between them began to blur. Lyra found herself watching Marcus more than the ruins, studying the lines of his face, the shadows in his eyes. Her quest for answers was now entwined with curiosity about her mysterious companion. The ruins of Helion waited, but so did the secrets behind the man who walked beside her. Twilight found them at the old relay station, its antennae twisted against the dying light. The battered silhouette of the comms tower cut a ragged shape against the bruised sky, cables hanging in limp arcs, rusted panels trembling in the rising wind. Lyra moved first, pushing through the warped entrance, her bioluminescent markings flickering as she entered the shadowed interior. Her boots crunched over glass and scorched plastic. The place reeked of ozone and memory. Marcus followed, silent as always, one hand on his sidearm, eyes flicking between the fractured windows and the hulking shapes of abandoned machinery. He stationed himself by the door, a steady figure in the gloom, his bulk shadowed against the failing light, a silent reassurance that let Lyra focus on her work. She knelt beside a half-melted console, deft fingers coaxing a stubborn panel open. "If there's anything left," she murmured, "it'll be here." Marcus cast a look at the sky through a jagged viewport. "You've got maybe 20 minutes before the storm breaks," he warned, voice low. Lyra's tail twitched in silent acknowledgement. She plugged in her patch cord, green-tipped claws tapping commands. "I just need a few." These old relay stations weren't networked after the blackout, they kept local backups. She pried loose a tangled data node, face intent in the blue glow. Static bled across her visor, then lines of text scrolled in a jittery crawl. Lyra's breath caught. "Got something. System log encrypted." She worked quickly, eyes flashing. The decryption resolved into a series of terse entries. Aegis protocol initiated, see attached. Secure uplink failed. Sentinel assigned override. Command string, redline epsilon. Her voice trembled with restrained excitement. "This isn't in the public archives. Sentinel Aegis wasn't just a project. It was active. Someone tried to bury this." Marcus shifted his weight, face impassive, but his hand gripped the doorframe harder. "Aegis is a ghost story," he said, tone carefully neutral. "Every scaver's heard the rumors. Some defense net that never fired." Lyra glanced at him, reading the tightness in his jaw, the tension coiled in his stance. "You don't believe that?" He shrugged, the gesture too casual. "Doesn't matter what I believe. Most people who chase these kinds of secrets end up dead." His gaze lingered on her, searching. She held up the data node. "I'm not most people." The wind outside rose in a sudden wail, dust whipping past the battered station in fitful gusts. Lyra glanced over her shoulder. "That's coming in faster than you said." Marcus's expression darkened. We need cover. Now! They sprinted for the crawler, half buried in a drift behind the relay. The sky had gone a furious orange, the leading edge of the storm swallowing the last sliver of daylight. Marcus threw open the hatch, urging Lyra in ahead of him. The crawler's cramped interior pressed close around them, storage bins stacked with rations, the air thick with the coppery tang of dust. Marcus checked the seals, then killed the engine. The machine trembled as the first wave of the storm struck, sand battering the hull in a relentless hiss. Shadows pressed in, the only light from Lyra's bioluminescence and the flickering readouts on her scanner. She busied herself checking her gear, adrenaline and excitement mixing uneasily. Her hands trembled as she pulled a medkit from her pack. A shallow cut on her forearm, barely more than a scratch, had opened in her haste at the relay. Green-tinted blood oozed in slow beads. Marcus noticed. He knelt beside her, silent, taking the medkit from her hands. His movements were gentle, surprisingly so, for a man with such calloused hands and a soldier's bearing. He cleaned the wound with a practiced swipe, the touch sending a faint thrill through her nerves. He wrapped it in synth fiber, his fingers lingering just a moment too long. "Does it hurt?" he asked softly, eyes searching hers. "Not much. I've had worse," she replied, but her voice wavered, betraying more than she meant. He looked up at her, the distance between them suddenly very small. The storm's howl faded into a dull, enclosing roar, shutting out the world beyond the crawler's steel skin. For a heartbeat, the air thickened with something raw and unspoken. Lyra's feline eyes caught the dim light, her bioluminescence pulsing in time with her quickening heart. Marcus's hand rested over hers, warm and sure. Lyra swallowed, forcing herself to look away. She needed to steady herself, to cut through the storm brewing inside as much as the one raging outside. She pulled her datapad from her satchel, fingers trembling only a little. "I found another log," she said, voice tight. "From the relay's backup. It's a personal entry from a Sentinel stationed here during the blackout." She tapped the screen, the soft glow illuminating her face. Marcus shifted closer, interest shadowed by something like dread. "Let's hear it." Lyra read aloud, translating the clipped phrases. "Stasis entered. All systems nominal. Uplink silent. No contact for..." She paused, squinting. 3 years. Protocol requires isolation, but I cannot remember my own voice. I dream of open sky. The stars feel further every day." She trailed off, the melancholy in the words lingering like static. Whoever they were alone, forgotten. Marcus's reply was rough, the words catching as if dragged from somewhere deep. "No one should have to be the last chapter. Not out here." He looked away, jaw working, and for a moment Lyra glimpsed the weight he carried, the silent grief, the memories of things lost. The walls of the crawler seemed to press even closer, the storm's fury only a distant drumbeat compared to the turmoil swirling between them. The silence stretched, not empty but full, of questions unasked, answers neither of them were ready to speak. Lyra met Marcus's gaze, her defenses wavering. In the hush between the storm's fury, their eyes lingered, the closeness thick with unspoken feeling. Outside, the wind howled and the sands raged. But inside, beneath the battered steel and the ache of old wounds, something new flickered. A fragile connection, charged and uncertain, waiting for one of them to bridge the gap. At sunrise, urgency returned. The storm had passed, leaving the world scraped clean and raw beneath a sky streaked with molten gold. Lyra was the first to move, her feline eyes narrowed against the light as she swept the crawler's sensors over the dead city's bones. Her bioluminescent markings shimmered with renewed focus, casting green reflections over the dusty console. Marcus watched her quietly, shoulders tense, hands resting atop the controls. For a moment, there was only the hum of electronics, and the distant wail of a wind that had not yet found peace. "There," Lyra said, voice sharp with excitement. She tapped a fluctuating glyph on her scanner. Localized energy spike, minimal, almost gone, but still cycling. Right beneath the amphitheater. Marcus's brow furrowed. That was the colony's command hub, back when Helion still had something to command. He steered the crawler into the sunken plaza, treads grinding over warped ferrocrete. They halted at the edge of a vast pit, where the amphitheater had once stood proud, a graveyard now, littered with the twisted skeletons of benches and shattered consoles. The structure's concentric rings had collapsed inward, forming a basin of wreckage and shadows. Lyra shouldered her satchel and leapt down, boots landing in dust that swirled green around her ankles. The pulse is getting stronger. She swept her scanner, tail flicking with anticipation. Marcus followed, eyes wary, every sense alive to the stillness of the ruin. Stay close, these old decks are as brittle as promises. They moved together across the fractured plaza, sidestepping cables that snaked like fossilized veins. The silence here was not empty. It pressed in, thick with the ghosts of voices and vanished ambition. Lyra reached the center, pausing over a scorched control node. Suddenly, a tremor shuddered through the ground. Metal shrieked, the earth yawning beneath their feet. Lyra staggered as the world tilted. Her scanner slipped from her grasp, skittering across the cracked floor. "Lyra!" Marcus lunged, grabbing her wrist just as the ground split wide. The stone gave way beneath them, and together they tumbled into the darkness below. The fall was a blur of heat and shadow. They hit hard, first Marcus, then Lyra landing atop him. For a heartbeat, neither moved, dust swirling in lazy spirals through the thin, stale air. Lyra's heart thundered, a wild staccato against her ribs. When she finally rolled away, Marcus sat up, wincing, and thumbed his lantern to life. The pale beam knifed through the gloom, illuminating a chamber larger than any above, cables draped from the ceiling, consoles half buried in debris. They had landed in the heart of the Aegis Command Center. The air was thin, every breath a struggle, and the systems flickered with dying energy. Lyra pushed herself to her feet, awe and fear warring in her chest. This can't be on any map. It's not in the archives. Marcus scanned the darkness, eyes haunted. This is where it ended, where they made their last stand. His voice was little more than a whisper. Lyra swept her scanner over the consoles. The readings were erratic, but unmistakable. An energy pulse, cycling down, fighting extinction. The signals here, Aegis wasn't just a myth, it survived. A hiss of static from above. Lyra froze, every nerve on edge, but it was only the echo of failing systems. She stepped forward, boots crunching on glass, and traced her fingers along a bank of sealed panels. Marcus moved with a strange familiarity, as if guided by memory instead of sight. He paused before a blank wall, ran his hand across the seams, then pressed his shoulder against a recessed panel. The metal groaned but didn't budge. "Help me with this," he grunted, bracing himself. Lyra joined him, both pushing with all they had. The panel shifted, then stuck. Marcus cursed softly, teeth gritted, as he forced his weight against it. His jacket tore at the shoulder, fabric splitting at the seam. The panel gave way with a final screech, revealing a corroded lever. Marcus reached for it, jaw set. "If this still works, we might get some air." He forced the lever down. At first, nothing. Then a hidden mechanism engaged with a hissing groan. Fans sputtered to life overhead, blasting cool, fresh air into the chamber. The dust whirled and settled, chased by the renewed breeze. Lyra inhaled, relief flooding her senses. She looked over to Marcus, intending to thank him, but the words caught in her throat. The torn jacket hung from his frame, revealing the skin beneath, a stylized shield entwined with a single star, inked in deep blue and silver. the insignia of the Aegis project. Time seemed to freeze. Lyra stared, the pieces falling into place. All the moments, his knowledge of the ruins, the way he moved through danger as if recalling old routines, the haunted weight in his eyes. It was all there, written in that emblem. She stepped closer, her voice barely a whisper. That emblem, it's you. Marcus stood frozen, breath shallow, the truth naked between them. The command center's failing lights pulsed, casting shadows that seemed to flicker with the memory of old oaths. Lyra's heart hammered as realization cut through her. Marcus wasn't just a guide, not just a survivor of Helion's fall. He was the Aegis Sentinel, the lost guardian she had come to find, hiding in plain sight. Her hand hovered, uncertain, inches from the mark on his chest. You stayed behind, she said, voice trembling. All this time, you never left. Marcus's eyes met hers, the walls he'd built finally shattering. There was no one else. I was the failsafe, Aegis's last defense. When the Kyrax came, they locked me in. I kept the systems running as long as I could. After the blackout, I waited for the order to stand down. It never came. His voice broke, old pain rising. I kept waiting, even when there was nothing left to protect. Lyra's gaze softened, her own defenses crumbling. She reached out, fingers brushing the frayed edge of his jacket, tracing the lines of the sigil. You weren't forgotten. The signal, your story, it survived. That's why I found you. Marcus's shoulders sagged, the weight of years lifting, if only for a moment. I didn't want to be found, he admitted, but I'm glad you did. In the hush of the ancient bunker, surrounded by the ghosts of Helion and the dying light of a world on the edge, the revelation shattered the last walls between them. The secrets of Aegis were no longer a myth or a legend. They were written in flesh and memory, binding Lyra and Marcus together in a way neither could deny. The bunker breathed with new life, and so did they. The bunker became a refuge, suspended from time. Above, the sun wheeled through skies bruised and beautiful, but beneath the earth, the command center seemed impervious to the march of hours. Lyra found herself drawn into the hush of this secret world, the air no longer stale but tinged with the promise of possibility. Gone was the adrenaline spike of their first discovery, replaced by a gentle, dawning intimacy. The consoles hummed quietly, systems slowly reviving as fresh air cycled and pale emergency lights flickered to life. Marcus, his secret exposed, sat on the edge of a battered console, gaze distant. The shield emblem on his chest seemed brighter now, no longer just a relic of the past, but a living testament. He spoke with a measured gravity, as if each word pulled something weighty from the dark. It was chaos, Marcus began, voice rough with memory. Kyrax ships broke through the outer grid. The colony's defense batteries gave everything they had, but the perimeter crumbled. We only had hours. He looked at his hands, knuckles white. Command told me to activate the Aegis protocol, a last shield to buy time for evacuation. I routed all remaining power to the grid, even as the reactors overloaded. Lyra sat cross-legged nearby, watching him with slit-pupiled eyes that gleamed with fierce empathy. Her tail curled around her ankle, the glow of her markings casting faint patterns on the bunker wall. You saved them, she murmured. The survivors, they got out because of you. Marcus shook his head. I did what anyone would given the choice. But there was a catch. The system needed manual oversight. Someone had to stay and keep the grid from burning out. I volunteered. He gave a wry, almost broken smile. Some hero, right? Lyra leaned closer, her voice soft but unwavering. You gave up your future for theirs. That's more than heroism, Marcus. That's hope. He hesitated, then pressed on, his story unraveling like an old recording. Once the last shuttle cleared orbit, I was alone. I set the shield to maximum redundancy and locked down the bunker. Central Command left one final instruction. Enter stasis as a failsafe, ready to awaken if the Kyrax ever came back. He ran a hand through his silver-streaked hair, the gesture weary. I sealed myself in the pod, thought it would be days, maybe weeks, but it was decades. The admission settled between them like dust, heavy and absolute. Lyra's throat tightened. She imagined the silence, the endless empty waiting. "Did you dream?" she asked, her tone trembling at the edges. "Sometimes. Mostly it was darkness, time melting away. But the real pain came after." Marcus stood and beckoned her, his movements hesitant. "Come, I'll show you." He led her down a side corridor, past flickering warning lights and locked doors. At the end, tucked behind armored blast shutters, waited the stasis pod, a capsule half consumed by frost and shadow, its surface cracked with age. Marcus knelt beside it, fingertips brushing the glass. "This was my world," he said quietly. "The pod kept me alive, but after the quake," he traced a fracture in the glass. "The failsafe tripped. I woke up to find the colony gone, the city silent. The pod's core was too damaged for another cycle, so I waited. Days became weeks, then years." His breath fogged in the cold. "I wandered the ruins, fixing what I could, waiting for a signal, for a voice, for anything." Lyra knelt beside him, heart aching. She reached out, tracing the emblem inked onto his chest, the shield and star a silent badge of resilience. "The worst part wasn't the waiting," she said, voice barely a whisper. "It was the silence." Marcus nodded, his hand rising to cover hers. His palm was warm, grounding her as surely as the bunker's walls. Their fingers entwined, the gesture unpracticed but natural. "It ate at me," he admitted. "I started talking to shadows, just to hear my own voice. The ghosts of this place kept me company. I thought I'd forgotten how to be anything but a sentinel, until you came." The confession lingered, soft as breath. The distance between them closed, the pain of isolation replaced by the fragile thread of connection. Lyra's thumb brushed across his knuckles, her bioluminescence pulsing in the dim light. "You're not alone anymore." They lingered at the pod, time slowing. The silence was no longer empty, but rich with shared understanding. Marcus straightened, drawing her up beside him. "You could have left," he said, searching her face. "Most would have taken the data and run." Lyra's smile was fierce and bright. "I didn't come all this way for answers. I came for truth. And I found you." Later they wandered the bunker together. Marcus showed her the old shield grid schematics, the comms logs he'd saved out of habit. They pieced through fragments of the colony's history, laughter echoing softly as they unearthed relics. An engineer's charm bracelet, a cracked family hollow, a faded schematic scrawled with jokes. Lyra asked questions about the colony, about Marcus's life before Helion's fall, about the dreams he had abandoned. Each answer built a bridge between them, the investigator becoming a confidant, the sentinel a partner. They shared simple meals in the command center, Marcus improvising with ancient ration packs, while Lyra teased him about his culinary prowess. Sometimes they worked in companionable silence, Lyra patching systems while Marcus recalibrated the battered shield controls. At other times, conversation flowed easily, memories and hopes mingling in the space between. One evening, as the last of the bunker's lights flickered to warm life, Marcus sat on the floor, back to a console, Lyra's head resting on his shoulder. He traced circles over her hand, marveling at the strangeness of company after so long. "I used to think I was just a relic," he said quietly. "Something left behind." Lyra nudged him, her voice gentle but sure. "You're more than that, Marcus. You're the reason Helion's story didn't end in silence." He looked at her, vulnerability plain in his eyes. "What happens now?" She smiled, her tail curling around his waist. "Now, we write the next chapter together." In that quiet, surrounded by echoes of the past and the tentative pulse of new hope, the years of Marcus's loneliness began to thaw. The bunker, once a tomb, became a home. Lyra, the investigator, became a confidant. Marcus, the relic, became a partner. Time lost meaning in the bunker's embrace. The rhythms of sunrise and sunset faded until all that mattered was the pulse of life within those reinforced walls. Lyra and Marcus fell into a pattern dictated not by clocks, but by discovery and the slow weaving of trust. The world above had moved on, but in the depths, something new was being born from the bones of the old. Lyra's skills, her sharp mind, her dexterous hands, the uncanny intuition that came from a lifetime of hunting for truth in half-buried ruins, became the key to unlocking the full archives. By day, she crouched over consoles, her bioluminescent markings casting green light across tangled circuits. Marcus worked beside her, his memory a map of the system's original design. When code stymied her, he pointed out the quirks only a living Sentinel could know. Together, they bypassed fail-safes and decrypted old redundancies, coaxing the dead machines to give up their secrets. One afternoon, as dust motes swirled through the filtered light, Lyra cracked a particularly stubborn security layer. The screen flared, filling with logs and fragments, a flood of memories, faces, laughter, and sorrow from a world gone by. "I think I've got it," she said, breathless. "Full access, Marcus. Everything they tried to hide." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Are you sure you're ready to see it?" "Some of it. It's not easy." She reached over, her hand resting on his. "I want to know. All of it." They watched together, hours of footage, logs, and transmissions. The colony's last days unfolded in jagged, aching detail. Evacuation orders shouted over static, engineers working by failing torchlight, children singing to drown out the alarms. Marcus's old friends appeared in the grainy video, Jalen with his crooked smile, Dr. Amari stubborn and brave, faces Lyra recognized from records, but now alive with color and voice. Marcus's hands trembled sometimes. Lyra squeezed his fingers, grounding him in the present. "You don't have to watch alone," she whispered. He shook his head. "I need to remember. They deserve that much." In the evenings, they lingered in the command center. Lyra asked about everything. About Helion's festivals, the strange flavors of the fruit markets, the jokes that only made sense if you'd lived beneath that sky. Marcus's words painted the city alive again, a tapestry of streetlights, laughter, children darting between gardens that no longer bloomed. He described the night of the Festival of Lanterns, when thousands of paper globes floated skyward, carrying wishes written in ink. "We believed if you wrote your fear on a lantern," he recalled, voice distant, "the wind would carry it away." Lyra listened, transfixed. "What did you wish for?" she asked. Marcus hesitated, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Back then, I wished for time, just a little more time to make things right." She touched his arm, warmth radiating through her palm. "You did. You gave them a future, even if it wasn't the one you hoped for." Their connection deepened, forged in the gentle rhythm of shared stories and the electric quiet that followed. Sometimes when Marcus drifted toward old grief, Lyra brought him back, her tail curling comfortingly around his arm, her voice a steady anchor. "You're not just a memory," she told him one night. "You're here, with me." One evening, after the archive finally yielded its last and most guarded secret, they sat together watching the colony's final transmission. The screen filled with static, then resolved into a shaky image of Helion's council. Weary, determined, facing extinction with dignity. Marcus's face, years younger, appeared behind them, a silent sentinel, armor scuffed, gaze steady. "We commit our story to the stars," the council chairwoman intoned. "Not in hope of rescue, but in hope that someday, Someone will know we lived, and that we fought not for ourselves, but for those yet to come. The transmission flickered out. Silence hung heavy in the command center. Marcus stood slowly, crossing to a viewport streaked with dust. Beyond, the galaxy glittered, distant, unheeding, beautiful in its indifference. Lyra joined him, leaning against his side. Her presence was a balm, her tail curling around his waist in a gesture of comfort and belonging. Marcus let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. I never thought I'd feel this again. Someone beside me. His voice was thick, emotion threatening to break through his composure. She turned, cupping his cheek, her thumb tracing the stubble along his jawline. You're not a remnant, Marcus. You're a survivor, and you're not alone. He caught her hand, pressing it to his chest. You gave me that. You and this place. I thought the world ended when Helion fell, but it just changed shape. Lyra smiled softly, her eyes luminous in the bunker's twilight. The world always changes. We just have to decide what we carry forward. He leaned in, and she met him halfway. Their kiss was gentle, lingering. A promise and an answer, their lips meeting with the certainty of two souls who had crossed deserts of loss to find each other. The bunker, once only a tomb, was now filled with new breath, new hope. Marcus rested his forehead against hers, their arms twined. Stay with me, he whispered. Let's build something new from all this ruin. Lyra's answer was a second kiss, more certain, more daring. A declaration that neither past nor future would dictate the present they now claimed. Around them the consoles hummed, and somewhere in the archives the last echoes of Helion's song played on, softer now, but alive. In the heart of a dead planet, the last sentinel of Helion found solace in Lyra's arms, their bond forged from loss and hope, a new beginning shaped by everything they had survived. The world outside faded to a distant thought. Time unraveled into gentle hours and quiet days, as Lyra and Marcus became each other's universe, orbiting through routines that blended necessity and affection. The Aegis bunker, once a tomb, then a prison, now transformed into something altogether different, a crucible for healing, for laughter, for hope. Lyra's presence brought warmth and color to Marcus's days in ways he had never imagined possible. She filled the sterile corridors with music, her soft humming echoing off steel walls. She brightened the gloom with playful banter, teasing out the shyest smiles from Marcus, whose laughter had once been a thing of legend, but long since forgotten. Every shared meal, every moment of shared silence, chipped away at the years of isolation that had calcified around his heart. They found joy in small things. Lyra would insist on rearranging the old mess table, scavenging faded bunting from storage and stringing it overhead. She argued for using the last of the spice packets on the ration stews, claiming she would rather risk blandness tomorrow than eat another gray meal tonight. Marcus would pretend to protest, only to watch her with quiet amusement as she concocted something almost palatable from what little they had. Try this, she said one night, pushing a steaming bowl toward him. Her bioluminescent markings glimmered with anticipation. He eyed it warily. If I survive this, you owe me another story. She grinned, her feline ears flicking in delight. Deal, but only if you finish every bite. They ate together, knees brushing beneath the table. Sometimes when their hands met reaching for a shared ration, Lyra would let her fingers linger a moment too long, the touch sparking warmth that lingered long after. Their romance blossomed not in grand gestures, but in the gentle rhythm of bunker life. After dinner, they would retreat to the old wreck alcove, its consoles now flickering with soft light. Lyra curled against Marcus's side, her head resting on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, a sound she cherished above all the mysteries she had chased. Late into artificial night, stories filled the darkness. Lyra told tales of the worlds she had wandered, markets that never slept, forests where the light was green and gold, asteroid belts glittering with ice. Marcus shared the quiet magic of Helion before the fall, sunrise festivals, the taste of sunfruit, the music of rain on city glass. Sometimes he fell silent, haunted by memory. Then Lyra would nuzzle into his shoulder and whisper, "You're here now. That's enough." They worked side by side, tending to the bunker's battered systems. Marcus guided her through ancient maintenance codes, showing her the quirks and secrets only a sentinel would know. Lyra's nimble hands coaxed new life from old machines, her laughter lightening the mood when circuits refused to cooperate. "Careful," Marcus warned one afternoon as she balanced atop a crate to repair a stubborn ventilation node. "Worried about me?" she teased, glancing down at him with a mischievous smile. "Worried about the node," he shot back, though his hands hovered close, ready to catch her if she slipped. They spoke sometimes of the future, of the signal beacon they might repair, of the possibility of rescue. But neither hurried. The outside world could wait. What mattered was the world they were building in the quiet heart of the Aegis bunker. One night, Marcus found Lyra standing by the old viewport, the last vestige of the colony's command. Her silhouette was a brushstroke of light, her bioluminescent markings glowing softly in the darkness. Beyond the glass, the stars wheeled in silent procession, unchanged by all that had passed below. He stepped behind her, arms slipping around her waist, pulling her close. She leaned into him, her tail curling comfortably around his hip. For a long moment, they stood in silence, the galaxy their witness. Lyra's voice was a soft purr, gentle and vulnerable. "Do you regret staying?" Marcus pressed a kiss to her temple, his lips lingering. "If I hadn't, I wouldn't have found you." She smiled, her eyes reflecting 1,000 stars. "You say that as if I'm worth the wait." He turned her gently, cupping her cheek with rough, careful hands. "You're worth every lost year." She traced the lines of his jaw, her thumb brushing over the silver in his stubble. "We found each other in the ruins, Marcus. That's not chance. That's a kind of miracle." He rested his forehead against hers. "I thought I was done with hope. But you proved me wrong." They kissed, soft and lingering, a promise made not just with words, but with every gentle brush of lips, every heartbeat shared in the hush of the bunker. The embrace was warm, steady, grounding. For the first time in decades, Marcus felt the ache of loneliness recede, replaced by the certainty that he was not alone, not anymore. Afterward, Lyra nestled into his arms, her head resting beneath his chin. "Do you ever wonder what will happen if the outside world comes back?" He stroked her hair, considering. "We'll face it together. Whatever comes, this—" He squeezed her gently. "This is ours." She purred in contentment, eyes closing as she let herself drift in the safety of his embrace. "Let them come. We've already survived the worst night. Now it's time for morning." In the days that followed, life unfolded in small, perfect moments. Shared breakfasts, laughter echoing down corridors that once knew only silence. Repairs made, sometimes with more optimism than success. Sometimes, Lyra would wake in the artificial dawn to find Marcus watching her, his eyes soft with wonder, as if he still couldn't quite believe she was real. "Why are you looking at me like that?" she would murmur, stretching lazily. He'd smile, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Because I never thought I'd have this again." Sometimes, as the bunker lights dimmed for evening, Lyra would read from the recovered logs, stories of Helion's people, of hope and struggle, of love lost and found. Together, they honored the past even as they shaped a new future. In the end, it wasn't the secrets they uncovered that mattered, but the future they began to shape together. In the heart of the Aegis bunker, beneath the ruins of Helion, Marcus and Lyra discovered not just answers, but each other. A love story born from silence, proving that hope and connection can survive even the longest night. This brings our story to a close. Don't forget to hit subscribe, give the video a like, and share in the comments which part you enjoyed the most. Our team will truly appreciate your support. There are plenty more exciting stories waiting for you on our channel. See you in the next video.